A billionaire came home early and found his wife's ex sleeping in their guest room. Alexander Grant came home early because he missed his wife. That was the part he would remember later with the most pain. He had not come home angry. He had not come home suspicious. He had not come home because a private investigator called, or because a security alert warned him, or because some anonymous message told him to check his own house. He came home with white roses in his hand and an apology in his heart. His business trip to New York had ended sooner than expected. The contract was signed, the investors were satisfied, and his assistant had booked him into the hotel for one more night out of habit. Alexander almost stayed. That was what he usually did. He usually stayed where business placed him, answered emails until midnight, woke before sunrise, and returned home at the time printed on his schedule. But that evening, as he stood alone in the glass-walled hotel suite overlooking Manhattan, he looked at his phone and saw a photo of Madison, his wife. She was standing in their Beverly Hills garden, wearing a pale blue dress, sunlight on her hair, one hand resting on the back of a white iron chair. The photo had been taken at a charity brunch 6 months earlier. She looked elegant, polished, perfect, and lonely. Alexander stared at the picture longer than he meant to. For years, he had believed he was building a life for her. Mansions, cars, staff, security, holidays, donations in her name, a closet filled with gowns, a terrace planted with the white roses she loved. But lately, when Madison smiled at him, he felt as though she were smiling from far away. He had told himself she was tired. He had told himself all marriages passed through quiet seasons. He had told himself that after the next deal, the next trip, the next crisis, he would slow down and become the husband she needed. That night, for once, he did not wait for the next thing. He changed his flight. At the airport, he bought her white roses and a small velvet box containing a delicate sapphire bracelet, not because jewelry could fix a marriage, but because Madison had once lost a sapphire bracelet on their honeymoon and cried over it for an hour. He remembered that. He wanted to show her he still remembered. He wanted to walk into their home, wake her gently, and say, "I know I have been absent. I know this house has been full of everything except me. I am home now. I want to try again." He did not know another man was already sleeping under his roof. The Grant mansion sat high in Beverly Hills, behind iron gates and tall hedges trimmed with the precision of wealth. At night, the house glowed softly against the hillside. Stone walls, wide windows, a long driveway, a pool reflecting the moon, and a separate guest wing connected to the main house by a glass hallway. Inside were 7 bedrooms, a private theater, a wine cellar, a library, a gym, and more silence than Madison had ever known what to do with. To outsiders, it was paradise. To Madison, it had slowly become beautiful proof of her own loneliness. When Alexander first bought the property, she had cried. They had walked through the empty rooms together before renovation began. Dust floated in the sunlight. The floors were unfinished. The garden was wild. The guest wing smelled faintly of old wood and rain. Alexander had taken her hand and said, "We'll make it ours." Back then, she believed him. Back then, he came home for dinner. He touched her waist when he passed behind her in the kitchen. He asked for her opinion and listened to the whole answer. He laughed more easily. He slept beside her instead of falling asleep in his office chair with a phone in his hand. Then the empire grew. Alexander Grant became more than rich. He became a billionaire real estate developer whose name appeared on hotels, private residences, investment properties, and luxury developments across the country. People wanted meetings with him, partnerships with him, money from him, approval from him. Every success took a little more of him away. Madison did not hate his ambition. She had loved it once. She loved the young man who spoke of building something lasting because he had grown up with nothing permanent. She loved the way his eyes sharpened when he described a project. She loved that he wanted to protect their future. But protection had turned into absence. He gave her a mansion and left her alone inside it. He gave her staff and forgot she wanted companionship. He gave her the guest wing and never noticed she felt like a guest in her own marriage. One evening, months before everything collapsed, Madison found him in his office after midnight. "Do you know what tonight is?" she asked. Alexander looked up from his laptop, exhausted. "Thursday? Our dinner." His face changed. "Madison, you promised." "I know. I'm sorry. The Singapore call ran long." She nodded slowly. "There is always a call, a meeting, a crisis, a deal." He stood. "Let me make it up to you. You always say that after missing the thing I needed you at." He walked toward her, but she stepped back. "Do you know what this house feels like when you're gone?" she asked. He looked around, confused by the question. "Safe?" Madison laughed softly. It was not a happy sound. "Empty, Alexander. It feels empty." He reached for her hand. "I'm trying." "I know," she said. That was the tragedy. She knew he was trying, but he was trying in a language that no longer reached her. Ethan Cole called her on a Tuesday afternoon. At first, Madison did not recognize the number. "Madison?" he said. The voice traveled through years. Her hand tightened around the phone. "Ethan?" There was a soft laugh. "You remember?" Of course she remembered. Ethan Cole had been her first great heartbreak. He had known her before Alexander, before charity galas, before diamonds, before photographers called her Mrs. Grant. He had known her when she wore cheap sundresses, wanted to write travel essays, and believed love should feel like running barefoot into the ocean at midnight. Ethan was not steady like Alexander. He was restless, charming, emotional, and dangerous in the way unfinished things are dangerous. They had dated in their 20s. He played guitar, painted badly, wrote long letters, and made Madison feel like the world was too big to live carefully. Then he left for San Francisco to chase a music project, promised to come back, and slowly became a memory she taught herself not to touch. Now he was back in Los Angeles. His voice was older, rougher, but still familiar. "I'm sorry to call out of nowhere," he said. "I didn't know who else to call." That should have warned her. But loneliness makes old voices sound like rescue. "What happened?" she asked. Ethan told her he had lost money in a failed business deal. He had been staying with a friend, but the friend's lease ended suddenly. He needed somewhere safe for a night or two while he sorted things out. Madison should have said, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you like that." She should have called a hotel. She should have told Alexander. Instead, she said, "Alexander is in New York until Friday." There was silence. Then Ethan said softly, "I wouldn't want to cause trouble." But he had called because he knew exactly where trouble could begin. Madison closed her eyes. "One night," she said, "guest room only." "Thank you," Ethan whispered. "You have no idea what this means." She did not either. Not yet. Ethan arrived after sunset with one suitcase and the wounded dignity of a man who knew how to look humble without surrendering control. Madison met him at the side entrance instead of the front door. That choice mattered. Even before anything happened, she was already hiding him. He stepped inside and looked around at the mansion. "Wow," he said. "So this is your life now." Madison folded her arms. "Don't say it like that." "Like what?" "Like it isn't real." Ethan looked at her carefully. "Is it?" She turned away. The guest wing was quiet and separate from the main house, with its own sitting room, bathroom, and French doors opening onto the garden. Madison told the staff Ethan was an old family friend who needed a place to stay privately for a few days. A few days. The lie grew as soon as it entered the room. At first, Ethan behaved like a grateful guest. He thanked her. He stayed mostly in the guest wing. He did not cross obvious lines. But at night, after staff left and the mansion grew silent, he and Madison talked. They sat in the guest lounge with tea that became wine. They remembered old songs, old streets, old versions of themselves. Ethan asked questions Alexander no longer asked. "Are you happy?" Madison looked into her glass. "I have a good life." "That's not what I asked." She laughed bitterly. "You always did that." "What?" "Made simple answers impossible." "No. I just never believed the answers you gave when your eyes said something else." That sentence reached into her. Ethan saw her loneliness, or at least he saw the part of it that benefited him. He told her Alexander had built a palace and left her in it like an exhibit. She defended her husband at first. "He loves me." "I'm sure he does." "Don't say it like that. I'm saying love can be real and still not arrive." She hated that. She hated more that it sounded true. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, they sat too close. The third night, when Alexander called, Madison was in the guest wing, with Ethan sitting across from her. Alexander's face appeared on the phone screen. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" Madison glanced at Ethan. Ethan looked down, smiling faintly. "Yes," she said. "Just tired." "Everything all right at the house?" "Yes." "Are you alone?" The question was ordinary. A husband asking whether his wife was safe in a large house. Madison's heart beat hard. "Yes," she said. "I'm alone here." Ethan looked up. Madison looked away. The lie settled into the room like another guest. By Thursday night, Ethan had become too comfortable. That was what Alexander would notice later. Not just that Ethan was there, that he belonged too easily. His suitcase sat beside the guest bed. His watch rested on the nightstand. His shaving kit was open in the guest bathroom. A pair of men's shoes stood outside the door. A half-empty glass of whiskey sat in the guest lounge. He had eaten dinner there, slept there, showered there, walked through Alexander's home while Alexander was away signing contracts to protect the very life being violated. Madison told herself she was only helping him. But help does not require hidden phone calls. Help does not require lying about being alone. Help does not require staying up until 2 a.m. while an ex-boyfriend tells you your husband does not see you. On Thursday night, Ethan stood in the garden with Madison beneath the lemon trees. The pool lights shimmered behind them. "You don't have to live like this," he said. "Like what?" "Beautifully lonely." She looked toward the main house. "You don't understand my marriage." "I understand you." "No," she said softly. "You remember me. That isn't the same." He stepped closer. "Maybe I remember the real you." She should have gone inside. Instead, she stayed. Ethan touched her cheek. Madison closed her eyes. The kiss was brief, but it changed everything. She pulled away immediately, breath shaking. "No." "Madison, no, this is wrong. You think I don't know that? I need you to leave tomorrow." His expression hardened. "Because he's coming back? Because this has gone too far." Ethan looked toward the mansion. "He has rooms he doesn't even use. I'm sure he won't miss one." Madison stared at him. For the first time, she heard entitlement beneath his vulnerability. "You should sleep," she said. She went inside alone. But she did not call Alexander. She did not confess. She went to bed with the lie still alive. Alexander arrived at the mansion just after midnight. The gates opened silently. His driver offered to carry the luggage, but Alexander said no. He wanted the moment to be private. He held the white roses in one hand and the small gift box in his coat pocket. The house looked peaceful, too peaceful. He let himself in through the front door. The foyer lights came on softly. Marble floors, tall windows, the faint scent of Madison's favorite candles. "Madison?" he called quietly. No answer. He smiled faintly, imagining she was asleep. Then he noticed a light glowing in the guest wing. That was odd. The guest wing was rarely used unless family visited. Alexander set his suitcase near the stairs and walked toward the glass hallway. Halfway there, he stopped. A pair of men's shoes sat near the guest room door. Not his. Not staff shoes. Expensive brown leather, worn from use. A suitcase leaned against the wall. Alexander stared at it. The flowers in his hand suddenly felt absurd. He walked closer. In the guest lounge, a man's jacket lay over the back of a chair. Beside it sat a glass of whiskey. On the side table was a phone charger he did not recognize. The house seemed to shift around him. He told himself there must be an explanation. A cousin, a family friend. Some emergency Madison forgot to mention. Forgot? No. Madison had told him she was alone. Alexander walked to the guest room door. It was slightly open. Inside, a man slept in the bed. At first, Alexander saw only dark hair against the pillow, one arm above the blanket, a watch glinting on the nightstand. Then the man turned slightly in his sleep. Alexander recognized him. Ethan Cole, Madison's ex-boyfriend. The man from old stories. The man whose name Alexander had heard only a few times, always casually, always wrapped in the distant safety of the past. He stood in the doorway, unable to move. His wife's ex was sleeping in his guest room, under his roof, in the house he had built to protect their life. The roses slipped slightly in his hand. A petal fell onto the floor. Madison woke because of the sound of the hallway light. She opened her eyes, confused, then saw the time, 12:28 a.m. Something was wrong. She went to the bedroom door and listened. Silence. Then she remembered the guest wing. Her blood went cold. She stepped into the hallway and saw Alexander standing outside the guest room, flowers in his hand. His suitcase still near the front stairs. For a moment she could not speak. Alexander turned his head slowly. The look on his face destroyed her more than anger could have. He looked wounded in a way that had not yet learned how to become rage. "You're home," she whispered. He looked toward the guest room, then back at her. "Yes." "Alexander, why is your ex-boyfriend sleeping in my house?" The words were quiet. That made them worse. Madison's mouth opened, but no answer came. Alexander waited. The silence stretched. Finally, she said, "He needed help." Alexander stared at her. "He had nowhere to stay, so you gave him a room." "Yes." "And lied to me." Her eyes filled. I didn't know how to tell you. No, he said. You knew exactly how. You chose not to. The guest room shifted behind them. Ethan stirred. Madison looked panicked. Alexander noticed. Were you afraid I would find him, he asked, or afraid he would hear us? She flinched. Ethan sat up inside the room. What's going on? Alexander looked at him. Ethan blinked, then registered who stood in the doorway. Oh. Alexander gave a bitter, humorless laugh. Oh, he repeated. Ethan got out of bed, wearing one of the guest robes. Alexander's robe. That detail cut deeper than it should have. Ethan tied the belt quickly. Alexander, I can explain. Alexander's eyes moved over the room, the suitcase, the watch, the robe, the slept-in bed. No, he said. You can leave. Madison stepped forward. Please, let me explain first. Alexander turned to her. I built this house to protect our marriage, Madison. You used it to shelter the man you never let go. She began crying. That's not what this was. Then tell me what it was. He was in trouble. Hotels exist. He called me desperate. My staff could have arranged something. He needed someone he trusted. Alexander's voice hardened. And you needed to be needed by someone who remembered you before me. That struck her silent. Ethan stepped into the hallway. That's not fair. Alexander turned on him. You are standing in my home wearing my robe after sleeping in my guest room without my knowledge. Fairness is no longer your strongest argument. Ethan's face reddened. Madison invited me. Alexander nodded slowly. Yes, that is the worst part. Madison sobbed. Alexander looked back at her. A guest room is for people we welcome together. You turned it into a hiding place for your past. Ethan tried to defend himself. Men like him often did when shame cornered them. Madison was lonely, he said. Alexander looked at him with cold exhaustion. I know. She needed someone to talk to. I know that too. You were never here. Alexander's jaw tightened. No, I was not here enough. That is my failure. Ethan seemed encouraged. Then maybe you should ask why she felt safer calling me. Alexander stepped closer. I will ask myself many painful questions, but none of them explain why you accepted shelter in another man's home and let his wife lie for you. Ethan looked away. Alexander continued, if you cared about her, you would have told her to tell me. You would have refused to become a secret under my roof. Ethan had no answer, because he had not come to rescue Madison. He had come because the past had opened a door, and he wanted to walk through it before anyone shut it. Alexander pointed toward the room. Pack. Ethan glanced at Madison. She did not look at him. That told him more than words. He went inside and began throwing clothes into the suitcase. The entire process took 6 minutes. Alexander stood in the hallway while Madison cried silently beside the wall. No one spoke. When Ethan came out, suitcase in hand, he paused before Madison. I'm sorry, he said. She looked at him then. For the first time, she saw clearly how small he looked in the wreckage. Not romantic. Not tragic. Small. You should have left when I asked, she whispered. You asked tonight. I should have asked sooner. Ethan's mouth tightened. Alexander opened the side door. Ethan walked out into the dark garden and disappeared toward the driveway, where a rideshare was already waiting. He did not look back. The door closed. The mansion became silent again. But silence was no longer peace. It was aftermath. Alexander and Madison stood alone in the guest wing hallway. The roses still hung from his hand, petals bruised. Madison looked at them and began crying harder. You brought flowers. Alexander looked down as if he had forgotten. Yesh. Why? He laughed softly, brokenly. Because I missed my wife. The words hit her harder than accusation. I'm sorry. He looked at the guest room. Did you sleep with him? Madison closed her eyes. No. He studied her face. Did you kiss him? Her silence answered. He nodded once. When? Tonight. Where? In the garden. He turned away. Madison stepped toward him. I stopped it. I told him he had to leave tomorrow. But you did not call me. No. You did not tell me. No. You told me you were alone, she cried. I know. Alexander leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. This is the part I don't know how to survive, he said. She looked at him through tears. That I found him here? That you kissed him? He shook his head. That you made me a stranger to my own house. Madison covered her mouth. He continued, voice low. I walked through that door carrying flowers, thinking I was coming home to my wife. And before I even reached our bedroom, I had to become an intruder investigating why another man's shoes were outside my guest room. She whispered, I never wanted to hurt you like this. That sentence does not mean what people think it means, Alexander said. Most people don't want the pain. They just want the choices that cause it. She flinched. He regretted the cruelty, but not enough to take it back. I was lonely, she said. I know. I felt forgotten. I know. He reminded me of who I used to be. Alexander looked at her then. And did you remember who you promised to be? She lowered her head. That was the wound beneath all others. Not simply that Ethan had returned, but that Madison had allowed the past to sleep inside the house where their future was supposed to live. Alexander left before sunrise. He did not sleep. Neither did Madison. He packed a small bag while she stood in the bedroom doorway. Please don't leave, she said. I can't stay here. We can go to counseling. We can talk. I'll tell you everything. He stopped folding a shirt. You should have told me everything before I came home to find it. I know. No, he said softly. You are beginning to know. She watched him zip the bag. The sound felt final. At the front door, Madison said, Where will you go? One of the hotels. Then he paused, and the irony crossed both their faces. Hotels. Rooms for strangers. Rooms where people slept when they did not belong at home. He shook his head. No, not a hotel. He left without saying where. Madison stood in the foyer as his car disappeared through the gates. Then she walked slowly to the guest wing. The room smelled faintly of Ethan's cologne. The bed was unmade. The robe lay on a chair. The whiskey glass remained on the side table. She entered and stood at the foot of the bed. For days, she had told herself the guest room was separate from her marriage. Now she saw it clearly. There was no separate wing inside betrayal. Every secret room eventually connects to the heart of the house. She stripped the bed herself, though staff could have done it. She carried the sheets to the laundry room. She threw away the glass. She put the robe in a trash bag. Then she sat on the bare mattress and cried until morning. Alexander rented a small house in Santa Monica under a company account, far from the mansion and its perfect silence. It had old wooden floors, a kitchen that needed repair, and windows that rattled slightly when the wind came off the ocean. Compared with the Grant mansion, it was unimpressive. Alexander liked that. For the first time in years, he lived somewhere that did not perform success. He ignored calls for 2 days. His assistant handled emergencies. The world did not collapse. That realization angered him because it meant he could have been more present all along. He replayed the night constantly. The flowers, the shoes, the guest room light, Ethan in the bed, Madison's face in the hallway. The lie, I'm alone here. It was not only jealousy, it was violation. His home had been opened to the man who represented Madison's unfinished past, and Alexander had not even known there was a door. He wrote down the facts because facts were easier than feelings. Ethan stayed 3 nights. Madison lied during calls. They kissed. She planned for him to leave before Alexander returned. She did not confess. Alexander came home early and discovered the truth. Then he wrote the sentence that hurt most. She made room for him. Not in theory. Physically. A bill. A towel. A robe. A wing of the house. Space. That was what betrayal often required before anything else. Space. Madison called, texted, emailed. Alexander answered none at first. On the 4th day, she sent a letter. Not long. Not dramatis. Alexander, I was lonely. But loneliness did not invite Ethan into our house. I did. I felt unseen. But feeling unseen did not make me lie. I chose that. I told myself I was helping him because that sounded kinder than admitting I wanted to feel remembered. I let my past sleep under the roof of our marriage. I kissed him in our garden. I lied to you when you asked if I was alone. I am sorry, not because you came home early, because I made the truth something you had to discover instead of something I had the courage to confess. Madison, Alexander read it twice. Then a 3rd time. He did not forgive her, but he recognized the first honest thing she had said in months. He replied with 1 sentence, I need time, and I need the guest room closed. Madison understood. She locked the guest wing that afternoon. Not because locking a door could undo what happened, because leaving it open felt like continuing the lie. They began counseling after a month. The first session was quiet and brutal. The therapist asked Madison why she let Ethan stay. Madison answered carefully at first. He was in trouble. The therapist waited. Madison looked at Alexander, then down at her hands, and I wanted him there. Alexander closed his eyes. The truth hurt, but the lie would have hurt more. I wanted to feel like someone needed me, she continued. I wanted to be seen as Madison, Not Mrs. Grant, not the woman in the mansion, not the wife waiting for a man on business trips. Ethan remembered who I used to be, and I confused that with him knowing who I was. The therapist asked Alexander what hurt most. He was silent for a long time. The guest room, he said. Madison began crying quietly. Alexander continued, a guest room is trust. It means someone enters your home with permission. It means welcome, safety, shared hospitality. He looked at Madison. You gave that welcome alone. You made a decision that belonged to both of us. And then you lied, so I wouldn't know my own house had changed. Madison nodded through tears. I know. I don't think you do, he said gently. Not fully. She accepted that. For once, she did not rush to explain. Months passed. They tried separation. Alexander stayed in Santa Monica. Madison stayed in the mansion. She dismissed half the staff temporarily because she no longer wanted the house to feel like a stage. She began therapy alone. She stopped attending charity events. She cut off all contact with Ethan. Ethan tried to reach her twice. The first message said, I never meant to destroy your life. She deleted it. The second said, he'll never understand what we had. Madison replied once, what we had was unfinished history and selfish timing. Do not contact me again. Then she blocked him. For a while, she kept the guest wing locked. Then one day, her therapist asked, what do you think is inside that room now? Madison said, shame. Then eventually, you will need to enter it honestly. So she did. She opened the door on a quiet afternoon. Sunlight filled the room. Nothing of Ethan remained. No suitcase. No glass. No robe. Just a bed, a chair, a window, and dust in the light. The room itself was innocent. That realization made her cry. The room had not betrayed Alexander. She had. A place becomes stained by what people use it for, but it does not choose. She sat in the chair and spoke aloud, though no one was there. I let the past in because I was afraid to tell the present the truth. The sentence echoed softly. It was the closest thing to confession the room could hold. Alexander returned to the mansion 3 months later, not to move back. Totok. Madison met him in the foyer. She looked different. No diamonds, no perfect hostess smile. Her hair was pulled back simply, and her face looked tired in the honest way of someone who had stopped hiding from mirrors. They walked through the house without touching. Alexander stopped near the glass hallway leading to the guest wing. Madison said, I closed it after your message. I know. I opened it last week. He looked at her. Why? Because I needed to stop pretending the room was the guilty thing. Alexander nodded slowly. They entered together. The guest room was clean, empty, sunlit. Still, Alexander's body reacted. His throat tightened. His hands closed slightly. Madison saw it. I'm sorry, she whispered. He looked around. I keep seeing him there. I know. I keep seeing the shoes outside the door. The robe. The suitcase. She bowed her head. I know. He turned to her. I came home with flowers. Tears filled her eyes. I think about that every day. I came home because I missed you. A tear slipped down her cheek. I know. And you had made space for him. She closed her eyes. Yes. The honesty no longer defended itself. That mattered. But it did not heal everything. Alexander walked to the window and looked out at the garden where she had kissed Ethan. Do you still love me? He asked. Yes. Did you love him? Madison took a long breath. I loved what he reminded me of. I loved feeling chosen without having to explain years of loneliness. I loved the escape. She paused. But no, I don't think I loved him truthfully. I used him, and he used the door I opened. Alexander nodded. That answer was painful, but real. They tried for several more months. Counseling, dinners, long conversations, honest apologies, painful silences. Some days they seemed almost possible. Alexander admitted his absence had wounded the marriage deeply. Madison admitted she had turned that wound into a door for betrayal. They both learned things they should have learned earlier. But every time Alexander imagined moving back into the mansion, he saw Ethan asleep in the guest room. Every time Madison walked through the garden, she remembered the kiss. Every attempt at rebuilding had to pass through the same hallway. Eventually, Alexander said what both of them feared. I don't think I can come home. They were sitting in the mansion library, rain tapping softly against the windows. Madison closed her eyes. Because of the house? Because of what happened in it. She nodded. I understand. I don't want to punish you. I know. I believe you are sorry. I am. I believe your loneliness was real. It was. And I believe I helped create that loneliness. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. But I cannot live in a marriage where the past was allowed to sleep under our roof while I was trying to find my way back to you. Madison covered her mouth. The sentence was not cruel. That made it final. The divorce was private. For a while, the public only knew that the Grants had separated after irreconcilable differences. Their wealthy circle whispered anyway, because wealth does not protect anyone from gossip. Some said Madison had an affair. Some said Alexander worked too much. Some said Ethan had stayed at the mansion. Some said worse. Alexander refused to discuss it. Madison did not defend herself with half-truths. When her closest friend asked, "Was it really that bad?" Madison answered, "It was worse, because I made it look smaller than it was." That became part of her change. No more minimizing. No more calling betrayal confusion. No more calling secrecy help. The mansion was sold the following year. On the final day before closing, Madison asked Alexander to meet her there. He almost said no. Then he came. The house was empty. Without furniture, art, staff, and flowers, it looked less like a palace and more like walls waiting for another story. They walked through the foyer, the kitchen, the terrace, the garden, finally, the guest wing. The room was bare. No bill, no chair, no suitcase, no evidence. Madison stood in the doorway. "I used to think this mansion trapped me," she said. Alexander looked at her. "It didn't." "No," she whispered. "The secret did." He said nothing. She turned to him. "I am sorry I let my past sleep under the same roof as your trust." Alexander's eyes softened with grief. "I know. I hope one day you remember that I loved you too. Not enough in the right way. Not honestly enough. But I did." His face tightened. "I know." That was the tragedy. Love had existed. It simply had not been protected. At the front door, Madison handed him something wrapped in brown paper. "What is it?" he asked. "The guest room key." He looked at it, then at her. "There are new locks now. It doesn't matter." "I know. I just needed to give it back." Alexander accepted it. Not because he needed the key, because she needed the gesture. They stood together in the doorway of the house that had held their best years and worst night. Then they walked out separately. Years later, Alexander lived in a smaller home near the ocean. He still had wealth, but his life was quieter. He traveled less. He stopped pretending every business call was urgent. He learned that presence could not be purchased after absence had done its damage. He dated eventually, carefully. When he began seeing a woman named Elise, he told her early, "I have difficulty with secrets." She replied, "Then I won't make you guess." It was a simple sentence. He had learned not to underestimate simple honesty. Madison moved to another city for a while, then returned to California and worked with a foundation supporting women rebuilding their lives after divorce. She did not present herself as a victim. She did not tell the full story to everyone, but she carried its lesson into every room. When someone told her they were lonely in a marriage, she would say it before loneliness becomes a secret with someone else. When someone romanticized an old lover, she would say, "The past feels safe because it never had to survive your present life." And when she thought of Ethan, which happened less and less over time, she no longer felt longing. She felt recognition. He had not been the answer. He had been the mirror she used when she was afraid to face the truth. One spring afternoon, long after the divorce, Madison drove past the old mansion. She had not planned to. A road closure forced her through the neighborhood, and suddenly the gates appeared ahead. They were different now. The new owners had replaced the black iron with warm wood. Children's bicycles leaned near the entrance. The hedges were less severe. Through the trees, Madison could see lights in the guest wing. For a moment, pain rose in her. Then, something softer followed. The house had survived them. The guest room was just a room again. Maybe grandparents slept there now. Maybe friends. Maybe no one. Maybe it had become what it was always meant to be. A place of welcome, not secrecy. Madison pulled over briefly. She did not cry. She only whispered, "I'm sorry." Not to the house. Not to Ethan. To the woman she had been. To Alexander. To the marriage that had deserved truth before consequence. Then she drove away. That night, she opened her journal and wrote, "A mansion can have many rooms, but a marriage has no space for secrets. When the past is allowed to sleep under the same roof as trust, the future begins to collapse before morning." She closed the journal. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, there was no guest room, no hidden man, no lie waiting down the hall. Only truth, painful, late, but finally awake.